Hello Capricorn and welcome to your year 2020 horoscope forecast. Thank you for joining me. This is for the Sun or the Ascendant. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. If so, please click or tap on the bell alert notification symbol. This year begins with Jupiter, the planet of growth and expansion, in your sign. It ended 2019 with Jupiter in this location, but it's going to be with you right through to the 19th of December. This is a wonderful opportunity to supercharge the things that are really important to you, but especially in terms of your personal plans. These lie at the very heart of your ambitions. Your sign is known to be very steadfast. You chip away at things in a very committed and applied way until you get results. But you're also cardinal, so you're a leader. And this is a fabulous opportunity, 2020, to really cast your identity in a very dynamic way. Now, it's true that your ruling planet Saturn gives you that sense of responsibility, of hard work and application, but it can also make you a little bit diffident. But this year, although Saturn is going to be with you for some of the year, it's not all of the year. But also Jupiter is going to be connecting with Pluto in a sensational way. This is really an agenda for change. And as the year begins, Jupiter is alongside Mercury in your sign, so your idea zone is absolutely sparkling with vibrancy. But the two are going to be linking with Uranus, the planet of surprises, which is now full-time for the whole of this year in your 5th solar house, which is all about the things you enjoy, your self-expression, and where you want to show a more free-spirited side of your nature. So the combination between the duo of Mercury, how you think and speak, and ideas, very businesslike in the sign of Capricorn, and Jupiter, which is about growth, about optimism and positivity, linking up with the free-spirited Uranus, is asking you to show a bit more devilment. But also at the start of this year, Mars, the planet of drive and passion, is in its home zone of Scorpio. This for you suggests that you can balance your individuality with networking with others. And this skillfulness can be underlined by the fact that the moon is in the part of your scope to do with everyday conversations. And it's also linking with Neptune. So it's very important this year for you to listen to your instincts around the information you receive from others. But at times, it will come back to how you feel about things. And so your determination to see through the goals that are important to you is at the core of this year's message. But wonderfully, at the turn of the year, Venus, the planet of love and affection, is in a very sultry part of your scope, in the sign of Aquarius. This can be excellent for your finances. So if you have really been applying yourself over the last couple of years, there's every chance you can start to see some rewards. And this is underlined by the fact that the midpoint between the moon in Pisces and the sun in Capricorn at the turn of the year on your solar return suggests it's right by Venus in Aquarius. So the midpoint and also Venus are together in your 2nd solar house. This is going to give you a huge appreciation of good food and good wine throughout the year, but also your self-worth, and that's very positive. There is one area that does call out to you that may be more tender, and that's around your emotional situation, home life, or a deeply personal relationship. This is because Chiron, the comet, known as the wounded healer, is in your 4th solar house. And right at the start of this year, it's alongside Black Moon Lilith, which is our kind of hidden desires. But this combination in such a tender part of your scope suggests that if you're very unfulfilled in your emotional life, that may be something you do want to change or heal this year. And it's going to become a real mission for you, particularly in the last 6 months, once Mars moves into Aries at the end of June, where it will be right through to the 6th of January 2021. But also this year, we're going to see an extended transit with Venus as it goes through the sign of Gemini, which for you is very much to do with practicalities. And if you're in a role of any kind which doesn't give you much pleasure, and it's not something that you can be particularly creative in, just making your way all the way to the boardroom is probably not going to be enough. You need to have a sense of fulfillment. And from the 4th of April through to the 7th of August, Venus goes through an extended transit in the sign of Gemini, which can be very positive for you and your work. But back to the start of the year. So we have, as this year begins, the Sun, of course, as it always is, in Capricorn. We have Jupiter and Mercury in conjunction, but we also have Saturn and Pluto, which have been pretty well side by side for 9 months by the time this year begins. Saturn being your ruler about structure, and Pluto being very much about transformation, but also about secrets, power. And the two side by side has meant that some parts of your existence may have creaked, because Saturn is about what you're used to, it's about your conditioning, it's how it's been, and Pluto is pushing you to change and be more innovative. So there may have been some kind of resistance, which may have been creating some exhaustion, limitation or frustration at times. But Saturn's your ace, because you stick in there when other people give up. But although they've been pretty close together, it's going to be by the 12th of this month that they become exactly side by side. And this could be a real seminal moment in your journey. But equally, we have an annular lunar eclipse on the 10th of January in the sign of Cancer, which is your sector of relating. But just before then, on the 3rd, Mars is going to be relocating, and it goes into the rather tender 12th house. And it's possible in the 6 weeks that follow that something that's been clanking around in the darkness of your depths, of your subconscious, which could relate to a past hurt or unresolved anger, may need some attention. But by the 10th, we have this lunar eclipse. But on the other side of the heavens, not only do we have the Sun, Saturn and Pluto, we also have Mercury and we have Ceres. Now Ceres is very much to do with nurturing, and it's asking you to nurture your individuality. But this asteroid could be in some ways subjugated to the restrictive energies of Saturn. So if you're someone who is quite reserved, and Capricorn people can be very reserved when they're younger, but become very much more playful as they get older, if there is some part of your being that you're not expressing, this is a year when you're being challenged to show it. Because the 7th house, where the eclipse occurs, is also the area to do with your open enemies, the people you know you need to engage with, but you may not find it very comfortable. It could be colleagues that are not so easy, or neighbours or family members. But it also can be an area of opportunity for relationships right through the following 6 months, but not if you're too single-minded. So it is going to be important to let the goodness of Ceres come through and not let Saturn pulverise your passion. Because remember, when Mars started this year, it was in a very passionate location. But because it goes into the deep freeze on the 3rd, and because of this annular lunar eclipse, things could slow down, it seems, a little bit in terms of moving things forwards. We get a supreme slice of astral magic on the 14th when Venus moves into the sign of Pisces. This is an area where Venus is exalted, and Venus is then going to give your personal communication a real magic in the following 28 days. But then Mercury moves into the sign of Aquarius from your sign on the 17th. So if you need to be more mindful of resources, money, obviously Christmas can be a very expensive time, then I do feel that Mercury, once it's joined by the Sun on the 21st and a new moon in Aquarius on the 23rd, is giving you the opportunity to recharge your financial position, but also to be more self-regarding to your self-worth, which is crucial. But there is a little bit of a challenge as this month comes to a close, in that Mars is going to be in a right angle in the last week with Neptune in the sign of Pisces. And that suggests that something could get a little bit distorted. It may be that that memory that's going to come through into your subconscious and can see your emotions be rather up and down really quite early this year. It's possible that that memory may need to be just distanced from somehow, discussed with someone you really trust or is very wise, to try and get a greater detachment or logical imprint of it, because you could feel a little bit swept away by something that was a little dark from your past or difficult. If you do have a communication with someone important at the end of January, it's important, very important, to make sure that you check any anxieties and fears that may be coming up, because you could start to articulate things that actually are not so much the reality and more the source of your subconscious. But that brings us into the start of February. Now, February sees on the 3rd Mercury travel into Pisces. Now, Mercury is not at its best in the sign of Pisces, but for you this is good. It's supporting the fact that you already have Venus there and also Neptune. But it's true to say that on the 8th, Venus moves out of Pisces and into the sign of Aries, where it immediately embraces that wounded healer of Chiron. If there is an opportunity to get together with people who really understand you and have a real simpatico with you and are very sensitive and empathetic, this would be a fine time to do it. It could also be a time when you're thinking very, very carefully about a love relationship, particularly if that love relationship isn't very emotionally satisfying and gratifying. However, it is true to say that on the 9th we have a full moon in Leo. And for you, this is very much to do with balancing your resources. And because it is T-squared by Uranus, so the Sun is in Aquarius, the full moon in Leo, and Uranus is between them in Taurus, it's possible that you could have some kind of expense that comes up or a desire to be a little bit more extravagant, which could see you quite impulsive over the following 2 weeks. If the sales are on, it could be because there's an item you see that you really want to snaffle, and good for you if so. But on the 16th, a magical moment occurs because Mars moves into your sign, and some of the anxieties that Mars has created moving through the sign of Sagittarius are just going to melt away. You're going to move into the moment, you're going to feel much more motivated and much more driven to focus on the ideas you were developing over the festive period for this year. Your physical vitality is also going to step up as well, so it's really something to relish. On the 17th, however, Mercury does slam on the brakes and go into a retrograde. If you're sending any form of communication, whether it be electronic, printed, or anything to do with contracts, care will be needed in the second half of February. Misunderstandings are possible. But equally, on the 18th, Saturn starts to separate from Pluto, and this is very positive. For 11 months, they've been so close together, about 3 degrees apart. And I do feel that in time, you're going to feel a bit lighter, a bit less inhibited, and perhaps hopefully more energized, especially with Mars's help. The Sun moves on the 19th also into Pisces, and you're going to see a quickening of the pace of life, despite the retrograde. So Mars and the Sun then come together in a really helpful way in the last phase of February. And also Mars is going to be triggering the energy of Uranus as well, encouraging you to be much more daring. Your reputation for being very cautious, very thorough, very businesslike, very responsible is absolutely outstanding. But it is important to go with the flow. And all this year, Uranus is asking you to step outside your comfort zone. Even if not all the things you try come off, it can be exhilarating to be a bit more daring. Now, by the 23rd, we have a new moon in Pisces. Great for how you think, also ideas, and also your communication with a sibling or a neighbour if you can overcome Mercury's retrograde. But this also embraces Black Moon Lilith. So it could be your desire is to connect with someone mentally and stimulatingly, particularly if there is that underlying worry about an emotional relationship in your situation. But from the 24th to the end of the month, the Sun broadly is connecting with Mercury. Mercury's retreating, the Sun's advancing, and you can have some absolutely brilliant brainwaves as this month comes to a close. Just be aware, however, that in week 3, Venus and Jupiter are at right angles. And if you do have the desire to splash out on something, it might be quite hard to resist. So as you come into March, Capricorn, there is a very Pisces dimension still. The Sun, Mercury and Neptune. But it's also true to say on the 4th that Mercury ingresses into the sign of Aquarius on an inverse basis. The retrograde's bringing it back. If there is a financial issue which has been dogging you, put all your attention into being very precise and micromanaging this until you get it to where you want it to be. By the end of March, I feel that you will have got this straightened out. Mercury goes forwards on the 10th and it returns to the sign of Pisces on the 16th. So that's when things can start to speed up in this regard. But on the 5th of this month is a sensational moment for you because Venus moves into Taurus, and Taurus is your sister Earth triplicity, but it immediately connects with Uranus. Around your love life, there could be a magical moment in the following 5 days, but you need to be up for it because it could happen very fleetingly, and it may be that someone's going to give you some kind of non-verbal signal. It won't necessarily be obvious. Then again, you may decide to assert your independence in a relationship which isn't working very well. With Venus conjunct Uranus, freedom is going to be part of the mix, but also there can be the spark of attraction. So it just depends on your unique circumstances how this particular dimension will play out. With the Sun combining with Neptune from the 5th to the 11th, you could feel a little bit less motivated. Your thinking lack a little bit of sharpness and clarity. Neptune, remember, distorts. But from the 9th of March through to the 4th of December, a quite magical alliance shapes up. It's one I mentioned before. It's between Jupiter and Pluto. Jupiter is much more progressive than Saturn. And because Pluto can be a dark force, in this combination, it's much more transformational in a positive way. People who have Jupiter conjunct Pluto in a natal horoscope often are very successful. And this is asking you to have real faith in the changes you want to make in your life, particularly if you need to really enrich the person you need to be and want to be, rather than staying trapped in a situation which is not any good for you. It's not feeding your sense of self. But there is also on the 9th a full moon, which occurs in the earthy Virgo, your other sister triplicity. But this actually feeds back into a great alliance with Jupiter and Pluto. I think basically there's going to be some kind of conversation that happens in the following 2 weeks. Now, it's possible people could take fixed positions, but if you can stay flexible, it's going to be very much to your advantage. You are in a real growth spurt this year, and it's a sensationally important growth spurt, one that can define you for many years to come. So take this particular full moon very seriously if there are discussions to be had. Because Mercury goes forwards on the 10th, that's great. That financial niggle can start to be resolved. On the 20th, however, the Sun is going to be moving into the sign of Aries, but there's also the vernal equinox. It's the start of the Western celestial calendar. Western astrology is not ruled by fixed constellations. It's based on the seasons, and this is the first day of spring. It's a wonderful magical moment, but it's also going to see the sun embracing Chiron. Chiron, remember, is focused on your emotional life this year. So if that's where you're feeling the pinch, whether it be around family ties, where you live, who you live with, or how you live there, the sun being alongside Chiron here is asking you to take your self-worth really valuably. But it's also true to say that by the 22nd, Saturn, your ruler, moves out of your sign into the sign of Aquarius, which actually it also co-rules on a very traditional basis. Of course, Aquarius is known as being ruled by Uranus, and the impulse of Aquarius to be original and sometimes a little eccentric sometimes can seem in stark contrast to Saturn's energy of real thoroughness and being very stable. But actually Aquarius is the sign of duality, because the Saturn energy sees Aquarius people actually having a real respect for the past, tradition and stability. But because Saturn moves into this area, it is going to be pressing down on your sector of resources. And through to the end of June, I think you may have to show a bit more discipline in this area. However, on the 24th, the new moon in Aries is a chance to make some fundamental changes to where you live, how you live there, and also to be open-minded. You need your home and emotional situation to be more playful, to be more free-spirited and enjoyable. And this particular new moon feeds in on a semi-sextile to Uranus, so very helpful. The 29th, as I flagged before, sees Mercury come out of shadow, and the 31st sees Mars move into the sign of Aquarius from your sign. If you have been working feverishly hard since Mars entered your sign, or over the last couple of years, but particularly on individual projects, Mars moving into this area can give you a real boost for the following 6 weeks. But it does go side by side with Saturn through to the first 5 days of April. And I think what this is basically saying to you, this is a time to take your resources extremely seriously and to micromanage them and scrutinise your expenditure as carefully as possible. Now, all through April, Jupiter and Pluto continue to collaborate splendidly. So if you're starting something new now, this has a good blast of a following wind to help you get things moving, to gain momentum. But on the 4th of April, we do have the move of Venus into the sign of Gemini. Venus in Gemini is a really sparkling and very charismatic influence, and it's going to be here for the next four months. So if you do want to transform your situation somehow, apply for jobs, do something more creative, think of self-employment, reorder the structure of your life in some way, using imagination, flair and quick wit will definitely help you get ahead. But for the first 5 days of this month, don't risk any money that you can't afford to lose. But it is true from the 5th through to the 11th that Mercury is forging a fantastic angle to Jupiter. So your thinking can be fluid, Mercury in Pisces, and Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn are linking brilliantly to suggest you're networking with people who share your ideas or your enthusiasm can really help you to get ahead. Now the 8th is going to see a full moon in the sign of Libra, which for you is a very prominent position for the moon. So it could see your emotions very close to the surface at this time, but they are going to be squaring up to both Jupiter and Pluto. So if there is something that you feel unhappy about in your emotional, family or home life, the chances are you are going to articulate it in the following 2 weeks. Now, on the 20th, the Sun moves into Taurus, which is great for you. This is about you picking up speed, being more outgoing and more creative. It also, like Venus did before, links with Uranus. The new moon on the 23rd is really asking you to find ways to reinvent things. If you are quite a creative and artistic type of Capricorn, this can be a purple patch for you for about the following week. It can also be a time when you may assert your independence more, or you may want to have some space to explore new social trends or new hobbies and interests. And you probably won't appreciate it if anyone starts to try and inhibit you in any way. Also, week 3 sees Mercury forging a very good link with Mars. So now you can articulate your ideas with real passion and determination. The 25th, however, does see Pluto slam on the brakes, go into retrograde. When the higher octave planets like Pluto slow down, so it seems that the whole of the world seems to slow down too. But on the 28th, Mercury moves into Taurus too, and your mind's going to be absolutely sparkling. I think Jupiter going into retrograde just asks you to not just look for tangible progress in an earthly way, it's also asking you to look inwards, to look at the more philosophical, psychological parts of your needs and your beings too. Now there is a key moment as May unfolds, Capricorn. This is because on the 5th, the North Node, also known as the point of destiny, inverses back into the sign of Gemini. Now, for this year so far, and some of last year, it's been in your sector of relationships. Now it moves into the sector of practicalities. So your emotional pull, along with Venus, of course, being in the sign of Gemini, is going to be about trying to get things working for you in a way where you feel fulfilled, where you're putting commitment in, but particularly to help others. Also, issues around health, fitness, diet come into focus on the back of this transit. And so you could find yourself looking for new ways, new, more novel solutions to improve that part of your existence. But on the 7th, there is a full moon, the most passionate full moon of the whole year, possibly, in the sign of Scorpio, which for you is all about friendship and your future direction. But this full moon is in opposition not just with the Sun, but also with Mercury. It's possible, therefore, that you're going to have to balance your desire to be more creative, more outgoing, and more enjoying the good things in life with how it works with the people that you're connected to. So it's your individuality versus the needs of the group. And that could come under the real astral microscope on the back of that particular full moon. But also on the 11th, Saturn goes retrograde. Goes retrograde initially in Aquarius, but it's asking you to therefore even more carefully manage your resources, but also even more carefully make sure that you're enhancing your self-esteem. Generally this year, Venus and that midpoint between the moon and the sun is going to be good for you financially, but you have to also use what you have in a very shrewd way. Something that comes naturally to you, but it's just a gentle reminder. Now on the 12th, Mercury moves into Gemini, its home zone, or one of its 2 home zones. And here this again is asking you to look at the detail of things, to focus down on the narrow picture, if you like, not so much the big picture. On the 13th, Mars moves into Pisces. And on the 14th, Jupiter goes into retrograde, joining up with Pluto. This doesn't suggest that you're about to become unlucky. It just suggests that the harder you work, the luckier you will get. And Jupiter's asking you to be more reflective at your inner journey rather than just the outer, more material plane. On the 13th, also, Venus goes into a retrograde. So although Mercury's moved into this location, the North Node, and the Sun also glides into Gemini on the 21st, followed by a very positive new moon on the 23rd, which links well with Saturn, your ruler, there is a direction of travel which is more practical. However, on the 29th, Mercury moves into your opposite sign. And if there has been any brittle tensions as Mercury's made its way through the sign of Gemini, this gives you an opportunity to step back, to hear where other people are coming from and be a bit more detached if they do have a differing view to you. As you come into June, there is a very testy right angle between the Sun and also Mars. Mars in the sign of Pisces is really asking you to express your ideas with passion and clarity. The Sun, on the other hand, is in a very practical, precise part of your scope. And if you're trying to do too much, cram in too much virtue, basically, which is what the sixth house is about, what it can do is see you getting a bit stressed out. And this is going to be underlined by an annular lunar eclipse, which occurs in Sagittarius on the 5th, which could trip you up. But it is true to say that in the first 5 days of this month, the Sun and Venus are actually forging a delightful alliance. But I think with Mars there niggling in the background, it's possible for you that your desire to help someone may be at your own cost, or perhaps you put so much energy into a situation that it actually leaves you feeling a bit drained. So just marshal your energy as carefully as possible, because the eclipse occurs in your 12th house, and if you overdo it, even at a psychological level, as much as a physical one, you could end up feeling really quite stressed out and maybe a bit drained. So it's a tender part of the year. From the 9th to the 17th, Mars is also alongside Neptune. If you are travelling anywhere or planning a journey or thinking of getting a new mode of transport, try to not do it within this slice of time, because Neptune really can distort the energies of Mars here, I feel. And it could be that someone tells you something that actually turns out to be totally and utterly wrong, even to the point of being a darn right lie. So just be aware of that. On the 18th, however, Mercury goes retrograde, and in the sign of Cancer, this could affect your relationships. Try to keep the lines of communication as crystally clear open as you can through to the end of the month. But the 21st sees the Sun enter Cancer, which is much better for you. This is giving you an opportunity to assert your boundaries, to be a bit more competitive, as much as think about how you'd like your relationships to be positive, proactive. But if you can understand what other people need from you, as well as clarifying to them what you need from they, then this can be a very positive development, especially as there is a solar eclipse on the same day. But this solar eclipse is going to be linking to Saturn in your second solar house in a quincunx, which is more challenging. So relationships in the second half of 2020 may be dependent on how much you can meet and understand one another based on similar values, or perhaps because you have a similar attitude to money, quite frankly. On the 25th, however, pleasingly, Venus comes out of retrograde, and the 28th, Mars fires into Aries, where it's going to be for the rest of the year. This is going to give you a real drive to improve where you live. So if there has been some kind of home improvement project in the background of your thinking or planning for some while, it could be actually coming into fruition in this period of time. If your drive is to grow your family, or it is to protect your family, or you want to work from home, anything that's linked to the home can see you very active and proactive in the second half of this year. As we come into July, Capricorn, there is another eclipse. But this one is going to be occurring in your sign. So it's very, very important for that reason alone. Also, Saturn, your ruler, is going to be reversing on the first day, you may remember me saying before, back into your sign. This could be a comforting thing, or it could be a limiting thing. It depends on your unique take. But I think what it does do is ask you to stay mindful of your individual needs. And because on the 5th we have this eclipse, if there is a relationship that isn't working, I think the next 2 weeks are going to be critical. What will help things, I think, is the fact that Mercury goes forwards on the 12th. And there is also an opposition between Jupiter and the Sun from the 11th to the 16th. If you really like someone, your enthusiasm, and especially if you have the courage to really say how you feel, could actually really be persuasive. But then it goes on to clash the Sun in the sign of Cancer with Pluto, and then latterly on the back of the new moon in Cancer on the 20th with Saturn. And I think that last one, which is going to last through to about the middle of August, could be quite testing. If there is a relationship where you're not getting the right balance between your needs as an individual, your needs or your willingness to cooperate, if that balance isn't being respected or met as you need, this can be a pinch point in the whole year. However, on the 22nd, the Sun moves into its home zone of Leo, which for you is really quite a magical transit. Because this is about transformation, this area. It's about growth, but it is also about letting go of the things that no longer serve your greater purpose. On the 26th, Mercury also comes out of shadow, something that we can all appreciate. So a relationship tangle at least can be talked through by then, even if it's not quite to the level that you would like. It's ironic really about relationships for you personally, because for everybody else, July could actually be in some ways really quite a good month for relationships, because Venus and Mars are in a very good alliance. It's not to say that there's definite trouble ahead here, Capricorn. It's more about you and your desire. It's not coming from me or the heavens. If you have a desire to have your voice heard more, be respected more, and be more appreciated and saluted and nurtured by a partner, and it's not happening, this is the month when you can make your real intent clear. So as you come into August, the Sun is in a deep and rather psychological zone. Mercury's in your sector of relating, and Venus is still in the sign of Gemini to do with practicalities. Mars is in the part of your scope to do with where you live, how you live there, and with whom. But on the 3rd, we have a full moon in the sign of Aquarius. But this is going to forge a T-square with Uranus. Once more, you could get the urge to be a bit more impulsive around spending. And on the 5th, with Mercury moving into Leo, I think it's possible that your thinking around finance could be to do with property, pensions, insurance, a business idea. But if you have got an entrepreneurial strand that you're wanting to express, just proceed with a degree of caution. The first 10 days of this month sees Jupiter and Mars in a right angle. Jupiter in your sign is about your individuality. Mars is about the people you're close to, or at least how you express your emotion. You could be a bit more forceful here, but you could overforce an issue, which there is no need to do. And also from the 5th through to the 22nd, Mars is forging a really heavyweight right angle with Pluto. This is one of the more difficult aspects that can occur, and it is going to be repeated after this month because Mars then goes into a retrograde. But for now, if there is a situation around your personal life where you're not getting exactly what you want as quickly as you want, the worst thing you can do is to try to take a shortcut, to be officious, to try to almost drive the solution forwards. It's going to take a degree of trust, this, and the trust can be increased hugely when Venus ends its 4-month transit through the sign of Gemini on the 7th, and on the 8th moves delightfully into your 7th solar house, one of its favourite transits of all. It can really bring some magic to bear, and the relationships that are really important to you are going to shine out like beacons. It's only the ones where you don't get your needs met in a fair way. You're not expecting anything to be perfect any more than anyone else. But if someone is basically taking you for granted, that's what that forceful energy of July is going to be about. Now on the 11th and through to the 21st, The Sun is actually forging a brilliant link with Mars. So if you did want to seriously make some changes to where you live, even moving altogether, that and the new moon, which occurs on the 19th, are brilliant moments for you to make your moves. And you can do so very decisively, particularly around a deep emotional consideration. This can see you at your leadership best. The 20th, however, is a magical moment because Mercury moves into the sign of Virgo, which of course is your earth triplicity, and it's to do with travel. And you may be thinking of getting away from it all. It's followed by the Sun on the 23rd. And in the last week of this month, both the Sun and Mercury are forging a gorgeous link with Jupiter and Pluto in your sign. So this is a great time for you to initiate new ideas, be more expansive and more optimistic about what the future can hold. It is true that your ruler Saturn does swap Mars quite forcefully in the last couple of weeks of August, but that's just saying to you, you've got to try to handle Mars in Aries. It could see you force something that would be better, more patiently laid out and followed up. The 27th to the 31st also sees Venus in opposition with Pluto, but that could bring someone into your orbit who is really quite fanciable. Will you be tempted? I think very possibly. Will you go forwards into something more? Only you could say. But if there's finance in the mix, or someone seems to have some kind of dazzling charisma, or be extremely well off, strip all that out. Just be focused on whether this is the right deal for you or the right relationship at a spiritual and emotional level. So as you enter September, Capricorn, the Sun and Mercury are still in your sector of exploration, independence and travel. If you are considering any kind of higher education or furthering business studies, this would be a fine opportunity to go for it. On the 2nd, there is a full moon. This occurs in the sign of Pisces. So it's possible that there are going to be some key discussions in the next couple of weeks. But this full moon does link in well with Uranus. So again, it's an opportunity to be expressive, imaginative, and innovative in your approach. On the 6th, Venus moves into the sign of Leo. For you, this is a part of your horoscope to do with passion, and it could also coincide with some kind of business development because Mercury moves to the top of your chart on the same day, and the both are going to be cooperating splendidly for the rest of the month. Your ability to cultivate good contacts or to put your plans across constructively, but in a way which other people can warm to, is really going to be enhanced. It is true that on the 9th, Mars goes into a retrograde. But this is why we've got this extension of Mars making its way through your sector of home and family. On the 13th, however, Jupiter goes forwards, which is obviously something for you to celebrate. And as it does, this is a chance to reinvigorate the key plans that you have to feel more enthusiastic for them. There's little doubt that over the last 4 months there may have been some kind of slowdown. But the new moon of the 16th just gives you even more permission to widen your horizons. And if you are someone who likes to stick mainly to what you know, it's further encouragement to open things up. The 19th to the 26th, however, does see Mercury squaring with Pluto in your sign. There could be a disagreement towards the end of this month, particularly if you do encounter someone in a position of influence who's less receptive to what you have to offer. But the Sun's move on the 23rd is really going to focus your mind about goals and ambitions. If you want to make it all the way to the boardroom, this is going to be the phase of the year that you need to really apply yourself with absolute commitment and attention to detail. On the 27th, Mercury moves into a friendly location though, so your networking skills can certainly be important. And the 29th sees Saturn, your ruler, end a backward journey. Now this is the last of 3 retrogrades that Saturn's gone through in your sign. It's now going to move towards its exit point on the 17th of December when it passes into Aquarius for a 2¼ year stay. And that for you is going to be very much to do with resources. But October sees a really quite magical celestial event. We have 2 full moons. The first is on the 1st and the second on the 31st. So we have a blue moon. The first one is in the sign of Aries, which for you is about that home situation, your emotional life, anything to do with the structuring of that area of your situation. But on the 3rd, Venus moves into Virgo, which is lovely for you. It gives you the ability to decide much more about what you want from relationships. It can make you more inclined to search out the facts of a tie, or if you're single, to be more open-minded about the type of person you could link with. However, we do then see a series of squares between the Sun in Libra and also Saturn and Pluto in your sign. But initially, we also have the first 3 weeks of this month, that continuing clash between Mars and Pluto. This is quite a heavyweight influence, and if you are involved with politics, with anyone right at the heart of your world, so it could be a partner, could be a family member, may even be a parent, this could be a telling time. With Mars and Pluto, it's really important to try to modify our language the best we can. It can be quite a feisty influence, and it can create quite a lot of frustration. It's basically a clash of willpowers. Mars is more impetuous though. It doesn't tend to consider things so much. Pluto's much more strategic. So if there is something that you've been wanting to achieve for some while and someone resists it, but you don't feel they're being particularly fair, this is what really could get your ire. However, on the 14th, Mercury goes retrograde in the sign of Scorpio. And perhaps in the next couple of weeks, it is going to be important to be very careful around your friendships. This is an area where there could be cross wires or misunderstandings, or perhaps you're going to rethink some of your longer term aims. But with the new moon climbing high into the sky on the 16th, but squaring up with both Pluto and Saturn in your sign, I do feel that this can be a point where your desire to have your voice heard in the wider world may be challenged by someone who doesn't quite get where you're coming from. Maybe they feel a bit threatened by you, or maybe you feel inhibited when it comes to putting your best foot forwards. However, there is a delicious link between Venus and Pluto between the 8th and the 24th, one which could have a romantic potential to get much closer to someone or appreciate the value that an existing person has in your life. The 23rd sees the Sun make its way into Scorpio, which for you is very much to do with friendship. So this is a great end to the month in this regard. And even if there have been those cross wires with Mercury tracking backwards, the Sun here is asking you to keep the faith. It may just be that there are some people who are set to churn in your social sector. Some people coming in, some people naturally fading out. On the 28th, Mercury returns to the sign of Libra. So this could suggest that a personal relationship to do with business or work may be at the heart of a discussion you need to have. But Venus moves to the top of your scope on the 28th too, and this gives you an opportunity to use your graciousness, your personality power, and if necessary, a little bit of charm in order to make progress. The full moon on the 31st, however, occurs in the sign of Taurus, which for you is about creativity, it's about fun. So with the autumn social calendar probably started to pick up speed, it may fall to you as you come into November to manage your time really carefully. It's possibly the case you can't please all of the people all of the time, and if someone isn't appreciating where you're coming from, this could be a further point towards maybe someone fading out of your situation. But on the 3rd of November, Mercury starts to go forwards, which is going to be very welcome. Initially in your 10th house, then by the 11th it goes back into Scorpio. And then by the 19th, it's coming out of shadow. So I think if there has been a stop-start around a relationship or about a longer-term aim, perhaps linked to work, I think you are going to be clearer by mid-month. However, on the 14th, Mercury starts to go forwards, which is going to be very welcome, especially if you have been feeling particularly sensitive or needing your own space a lot more in your home environment. On the 15th, there's a gorgeous new moon in Scorpio, which also links through to Neptune. It suggests that a conversation can prove to be very uplifting, which takes you right into the middle of December and really pleases you. Perhaps someone's going to restore your faith in person kind. On the 22nd, however, the Sun makes its way into your 12th solar house. But on the same day, Venus moves into a very sociable sector, the passionate Scorpio. I think this is just, again, it's testing the mettle of certain alliances. What you're really needing to have here is sincerity and people who really are trustworthy and are committed to you, even if they're not maybe the most charismatic or fashionable of people in your circle. It's going to be those real stalwarts that you're going to be appreciating towards the end of this month. On the 29th, Neptune goes forwards. Confused thinking and communication, which has been perhaps a factor in the last few months, can get easier and be replaced by much more imaginative strands. Now, on the 30th, there is an annular lunar eclipse in the sign of Gemini, which for you is very much about practicalities around your work. As much as you may just want to focus on the practical strands of it, it is going to be important to really feel that what you do has some kind of emotional content or gratification for you. If it doesn't, you may think again. And if you are feeling a little bit weary and tired, don't just look at it in terms of a physical context. Also look at how you're feeling about where you put the commitments into your life, where you're providing support to others, where you're being sacrificing. If you're overdoing these things and not looking after yourself, this is a perfect time to get some extra sleep and really be much more mindful about your diet. As December dawns, so Mercury plays catch-up and joins with the Sun in the sign of Sagittarius. Mercury in this area is not at its best, it's in detriment, and for you it's your 12th house. There could be a period of time through to the 20th when you do find yourself feeling a little bit more anxious or not quite getting into the Christmas spirit as much as you may have thought you would. But on the 14th, there is a total solar eclipse, the first of the year, and it does forge a brilliant angle to Mars. This is really encouraging you to listen to your inner voice, especially around that deeply personal, emotional, or family or home-based issue. And if you do come to a firm decision, I do feel in the first 5.5 months of 2021, you're going to be quite dynamic in acting it out. However, it is true on the 17th that Saturn, your ruler, as I flagged before, moves into Aquarius. This is your sector of everyday finance, but also it's your sector of your self-worth. If that is an area of vulnerability with you, the next few years will give you a chance to work on it. And with Jupiter moving on the 20th into the same zone, there's every chance you could have some good fortune towards the end of this year or next year. And of course, the harder we get, the luckier we get, as you know, more than any other zodiac sign, because you're inherently very self-disciplined. On the 21st, there is, however, a delightful shift for you. The Sun and Mercury join up with your sign, and you will start to feel much livelier. In fact, you can actually click into top form and be very sparky and be much of a leader in the situation that needs to be managed over the festivities. There is a full moon in your opposite sign on the very last day of this year, so it's possible that a relationship issue may really be on your mind as this year comes to a close. But it's certainly going to be a terrifically powerful year, and with Jupiter going alongside Pluto for much of this year, there is a real opportunity for you to thrive in much more of an individualistic way. If you'd like to know what 2020 would hold from a personal point of view, rather than just your zodiac sign, please click on the link beneath this video. If you order your year's forecast in 2019, I'll give you the rest of 2019 free. If you order it in 2020, say in April, don't worry, I'll give you a full 12 months from that time. But for now, it's been a real pleasure being with you. Good luck and goodbye.